All right, and we are back to being live. We're probably going to be doing 3 videos today, so that's pretty cool. I forgot about the Warhammer community article. Oh, you silly goose. Let's take that off. And I did want to go over that, so let's talk about that a little bit. Let's dig into it. Let me and we're gonna flop, boop, and boop. All right, and hell yeah. All right, so let's take a look at the newest Warhammer community article. It might not be the newest as of today, but it just dropped, yesterday. So it's all changed in the upcoming new edition of Warhammer 40,000. Even the very basics of the game have been simplified to make the game smoother and faster without losing depth. We'll see. The turn structure is still the same. One player takes the turn to remove and fight with all the forces, blah, 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 blah. Then the second player does the turn. This is called the first battle round, but 7 phases have now become 5, and both players will now contest each one to the fullest. So the first phase is the command phase, and that's where you take your battle shock tests or your recovery tests, whatever you want to call it. Like if I don't know if that's when you roll battle shock yet. I assume that's at the end, right? Like at the end of the fight phase or something. You might have to make it at the beginning of the command phase. We'll dig into this a little bit, but basically that is where your battle shock is. That's where your buffs get handed out. That's where some of your psychic spells get used. Movement phase has largely not looked like the movement phase largely looks like it's unchanged. Like there may be some other things, like some of your psychic powers go off in the movement phase now. Shooting phase, samesies. Charge phase, samesies, and fight phase. So a lot of this doesn't really change. It's just we've lost the morale phase and we've lost the psychic phase. The psychic phase and the morale phase are now no more. This doesn't mean that they are gone. They've just been compressed into other phases, which, yeah, whatever. I mean, we'll see. To me, this is largely an indifferent change. We'll see. For some players, T-Suns, Grey Knights, and Eldar, the old Psychic style phase was a Technicolor carnival of Imperium delights. For others, especially the Tau Empire Necrons, it was often 10 minutes spent watching your opponent make a bunch of mysterious 2d6 rolls and remove models accordingly. And he's not wrong, right? Like, whoever wrote this article, they are not wrong. You know, playing against Grey Knights or Thousand Suns, waiting for that psychic phase to get done, was a lot like waiting for a Tau shooting phase, right? Like, you're just like, I might as well grab a chair. I'm not going to get to interact with anything. I'm just going to remove models. You get to do what you want. This was often unfun and awkward to play around, so now psychic powers are used throughout the other phases, peering into the future for tactical insights, blah, 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 blah. So it tells you, like, there's going to be some in command phase, there's going to be some in the fight phase, there's going to be some in the shooting phase. Now, here's what's interesting. I've had a lot of people say, do you think you're going to get your psychic attacks in addition to your regular shooting attacks? While the GW has not confirmed it, this sentence right here that's highlighted makes me think yes, because it simply says that's a ranged attack used in the shooting phase alongside any regular guns you may be carrying. So this tells me that you're likely going to be able to shoot your guns and make your psychic attacks in the shooting phase both, not pick one or the other. Now, we don't know, but this sentence right here does lead me to believe that yes, this is a thing that we're going to have. The new Terminator Librarian, for instance, unleashes his smite in the shooting phase. You can choose to either do a controlled mental burst or a recklessly powerful psychic onslaught that may backfire thanks to the hazardous weapon ability. Let's look that up real quick. Well, let's actually go back and let's open that in a new tab. Oh, guess what's not in here? Hazardous. Of course it's not. Why would it be? Okay. And that one's not in here. All right, so cool. Might be in this article. We'll dig a little bit deeper. Sorry. Hey, what's up, buddy? Good to see you. haven't been on Twitch in a bit, been trying to explore the YouTube live streams, and now I'm just multi-streaming, which has been way better. We're hitting Twitch and YouTube at the same time. We got it going. All right, so if you look, right, we have Smite, which is a Witchfire, and Smite, which is focused Witchfire. But this one has Devastating Wounds, which I think is I think that is in here. I think that's the one that you're like your wound rolls, your critical wound rolls are a mortal wound. Yep. Devastating wound rolls, critical or a mortal wound on a unmodified wound roll of 6. So, if you want devastating wounds, you get hazardous, and I assume hazardous is just the opposite of devastating wounds. Like it's probably your hit rolls of 1 do a mortal wound, kind of like the plasma supercharge ability. I assume that's all it is, but again, we don't know. But if you look at the smite, right, it's D6 attacks, but it doesn't have blast. And we don't really know, I think, what blast does, if I remember right, but we know it exists because it's actually on this data sheet right here, the Terminator one. Who is it? Maybe it's not on this one. But there was a sheet that had blast on it. Yeah, it's right here. Right? No. The one that had the Terminator with the crack and frag grenades on it. That one had blast, but I don't think it explained what blast was. Your ballistic seal for these attacks is 3. Your strength is 5 for the regular, so it's strength 5 minus 1 D3 damage, or strength 6 minus 2 D3 damage. So this is interesting because this means your psychic powers don't really do mortal wounds inherently anymore, and I love that. I don't like mortal wounds. I'd be happier if there was no devastating wounds, but I'm not going to complain that in order to get devastating wounds, you have to supercharge your weapon, right? I am super happy that it's not just like I roll 2 dice and you just take a bunch of damage and there's no interaction. You know, -1 D3 damage is a lot better than just take a D3 mortal wounds, right? So that's pretty cool. I like it. It does have the psychic keyword or psychic power. We don't know exactly what that's going to do, but we know that there's certain things that interact with it. So like a good example is this psychic hood. While this model is leading a unit, models in that unit have a 4+ feel no pain against psychic attacks. So you get a 4-up shrug against smites if he's in that unit. So again, like it makes sense. I like this interaction so far. Everything's cool. While he is leading this unit, they have the sustained hits ability. That's interesting. I assume this is just a psychic power, and we don't know, but I assume you're going to be able to maybe swap them out, right? Because Veil of Time is a marine psychic power. And what this does is this tells me that we're probably not making psychic tests anymore. Again, I don't know, so don't get on Reddit or Twitter and say, "Oh, Chris said this," because I don't know. But what it tells me is that if this is just an inherent ability on the datasheet, then the psychic powers just become inherent abilities on the datasheet, right? Now he has got a 4+ invulnerable save, which is pretty standard. It's interesting that it's not a 5-up because he doesn't have a storm shield, but I believe the Terminators had a 4-up when they leaked those. And it does make me wonder what the storm shields are going to do. Are they just going to do +1 to your armor save? Are they going to give you some kind of feel no pain? Like, it makes me curious to know how they're going to interact. It's weird to me that we're going to a 4+ invulnerable save. So we're reducing AP, we're reducing damage, we're reducing all these things, but then we're also making saves better. This is kind of interesting. I don't know that we need a 4+ invulnerable save if the AP and stuff of guns are going down, but we'll see. We might just have a lot fewer mechanics that interact with your saves, and that could be why too, right? Because simpler but not simple might be, hey, we just aren't going to have these 5,000 different rules that make you have to add 1, +1, add 1, -1, so on and so forth. So that's how that interacts, right? So now let's take a look at the Weird Boy, because they leak some things on the Weird Boy. And the Weird Boy is interesting. I'm an orc player. as all of you know. And my first impression of this was, of course, it works this way, right? Like, why wouldn't it work this way? And we'll kind of get into this. Ed Banger, so it has precision and it has psychic. So that's interesting. We don't know what precision does. But I'm telling you, either Ed Banger is going to be really, really good or it's going to be effectively worthless, and there's not going to be a difference. He does have Deadly Demise D3. So what that means is he explodes like a vehicle when he dies. And then, while this model is leading a unit, you add 1 to the strength and damage characteristics of his Ed Banger weapon for every 5 models in that unit, rounding down. But while it has 10 or more models, that weapon has the hazardous ability. So we don't know what units he can go into yet, because it sounds like certain guys can only go into certain units. But we do know that if you put him in with 30 boys, right? For every 5 models, so it's going to be strength 12, and it's going to do what, 7 damage. But it's a single shot with ballistic skill 4. But it does have the hazardous ability, so again, we assume that that's hit rolls of 1, just do a mortal wound, but we don't know. So it's one of those where if precision is like ignore lookout, sir, or a sniper rule, that's going to be super silly, and he's going to be really good. Maybe not like auto include in every army really good, but the way the jump works, he's probably still going to be an auto include in most armies. But he's going to be good. His Weird Boy staff is largely unchanged. It does fight at strength 8 -1 D3 damage now, which I think it used to be 7. So that's an interesting strength bump there. And then the other thing was to jump. Once per turn, at the end of your movement phase, 1 Weird Boy from your army can use this ability. You roll a d6. On a 1, you suffer a d6 mortal wounds, but on a 2, they just get to jump. I'm mixed. Like, d6 mortal wounds seems very punishing for this ability, and I was talking to a couple people about it, and if the jump becomes a more rare mechanic, then sure, is worth the risk for the D6 mortals, and I'd probably do it anyway, to be honest with you, right? But if every army or a lot of armies, like T-Suns have one, Necrons have one, like if all these armies have some sort of teleporting power like they do now, and mine is the only one that can damage me, like it just is orcs getting more of the same. But if it becomes much more limited than it has been, then sure. I still think D3 would have been a little bit more palatable, but again, I don't have the context of the full rules. We don't know where this is going to go. The one thing I did want to point out that I thought was super interesting about this data sheet is this right here, right? I don't know if you can see my little duder here, but if you look at his save, he's got a 5-up save. So Weird Boys right now have a 6-up save. So their T5 6-up save, he has 1 less wound. He went down to 4 wounds, but he got a better save. So I'm curious to know if this is going to go across the board, if like all orcs with a 6-up save are now going to 5-up, or if this is just because he's a character, right? I would like to know. We will see. All right, so let's look at the morale phase. Morale is, and there is no morale phase, so I don't know why they called it that, but that's cool. Morale is simpler. It all gets sorted in your command phase when you take battle shock tests. Oh, that's right, that's right. For any units that have taken enough losses, you roll 2d6 for every unit that's below half strength. That means if they're a squad with less than half of their starting models, or a single model with less than half of its starting wounds. So this means characters need to roll leadership now. Then you'll need to roll equal or above your new leadership characteristic. If you fail, that unit suffers some nasty penalties until your next turn. So this means, like, as an orc player, I can now bring 30-man bricks of boys if I want to, because I don't have to start worrying about leadership until I lose like 16 of them. So that's cool. And it's going to be even cooler if I get some sort of mob rule back that actually interacts with the game in a meaningful way, or if my war bosses can make you ignore leadership like they used to. Even if they don't, that still feels better than it did, right? When the unit is battle shocked, it basically can't control objectives because its OC control characteristic is 0. If it falls back, you have to use the Desperate Escape test for every model in that unit. And that tells me that Desperate Escape is probably no longer a stratagem, but just a form of falling back. And they probably just baked the stratagem into the core rule. And that would make sense, right? And its controlling player cannot use stratagems to affect that unit. So these are all cool. Like I can still move, I can still charge, I can still do all these things that I need to do. I just cannot take objectives and hold them with that unit. And I cannot use strats on them. Like I am totally fine with this. What is infuriating to me is when I'm picking up extra models in the morale phase, but I'm watching my opponent not interact with the morale phase because he's got power armor or whatever. So it's one of those where this to me is very good, and it makes me wonder if Space Marines are going to just go back to being able to reroll morale checks, which again would make sense, and I'm fine with it. They shall know no fear. That all makes sense. And it says that right here. Casualty is no longer just a casualty multiplier, and now impacts every other phase of the game. So again, I like this interaction. This looks good. Everything about it, I'm enjoying. Now that we've looked at this, the one thing I will say, and this again, I have to try to remember that I'm taking this without the context of the full rules. But from what I have seen, even more so than the current edition, 10th is going to be focused around shooting a bit more. And the reason I say that is that, like, your smites are just shooting attacks, and we're looking at it thinking you just get to make them when you make your ranged attacks, right? Interesting. I want to go over this right here in a minute. The combi weapon. But yeah, anyway, sorry. I got a little sidetracked. Let's look at combi. Let's look at devastating wound. Yeah, okay. It does say critical wound. Up here it said a wound roll of 6. Um, but this says critical wound. And that's what I wanted to double check. So like his combi weapon is just a mortal wound gun, right? It automatically wounds infantries on 4s, but it's only a single attack with rapid fire 1, which I assume, again, we don't know, but I assume that means if you stand still, you get to shoot it an additional time, or if you are within half range. That might have been covered. I don't remember. We'll have to dig back and double check. But like I said, all in all, it looks like it's going to be a little bit more shooting focused than the game already is. And so it's going to be one where we'll have to see how it all pans out and plays out. That's really been the only negative I've seen so far. The Weird Boy seems a little underwhelming. I will say that if they take orcs and they make them play like they did in the earlier editions, where it's like high risk, high reward, and I get my sillier mechanics back, then I don't even care. I don't care if they're good. If I get to do just some dumb, silly stuff because I'm playing orcs, I'm happy. If they give me that kind of interaction back, cool. I really want to see how some of these orc guns are going to interact. That would actually make me happy. I want to know if DACA is going to continue to be a weapon type or if they're going to lose that, which I guess it wouldn't be a weapon type. It would just be a special rule. And then DACA as a special rule might just be the sustained hits or sixes explode, whatever you want to call it. So that's where we're at on that right now. It's again, I've seen a lot of the leaks. I like a lot of the leaks. I have no complaints over most of it, and a lot of it just looks like very positive changes. While I've got people on here, I am not going to be streaming a game tomorrow because of Region Con on Friday. But next week, on Thursday, we will be streaming. We'll be back on our regular stream schedule, and it will be Sisters of Battle and Tyranids. So we're finally going to get that Sisters of Battle game. If I can, I'm going to use the WTC style terrain just so I can show everybody how it interacts and what we can do with that and see what we can do to get that working. If I cannot, then we may do some player place terrain just to kind of change it up. So, as always, thanks for watching. You guys have a great day.